It was late when I wandered into the library. I had forgotten to study for a test the next day, a party the previous night, and the next dorm overtaking precedence over my academics. I was determined to ignore the hangover that still hammered in my brain. I needed to keep my grades up to become the best pathologist I could be. Regardless of my hangover, I browsed amongst the shelves, the books containing the information I needed being in what seemed little supply. Reading was a chore, and as there was no one but myself to occupy the expanse of college texts, I soon began to grow dangerously tired. So much so that I fell asleep where I had sat to rest. I woke up, baffled at my changing surroundings. It resembled not one room present at the university, nor did I feel like I was anywhere in particular at all, if that makes sense. I became aware of a growing sense of paranoia and loneliness. The room, as it suggested, was present in some sort of hospital somewhere. The dominant side of my brain, the logical side, brought to my attention the strange lack of any sounds whatsoever, of which there should have been. There should have at least been blips and beeps from the machines, or the distant sounds of doctors and nurses conversing over a patient. Sick people coughing, crying, or discussing fears with their family and friends. There was none of this to speak of. The emptiness was haunting, horrifying even to some degree. As I walked out into the corridor, my suspicions were confirmed that I was, in fact, the only person in this strange hospital. As my fears grew exponentially by the moment, I noticed an odd sound coming from the reception area of this abandoned hospital. I was desperate at that point for any sort of human contact, or even an animal that had somehow gotten inside. I needed to know I wasn't alone. The man sitting in the seat before my eyes was injured badly, that much I could see. One could say he was nearly mummified, but I was surprised and very much happy to make contact with another living soul in this place. I attempted to speak to the man, but he just sat there and stared at me, unblinking. I knew he could see me as he was staring straight at me, but no response. He was beginning to frighten me, so I turned and left. I escaped to a nearby room to find another hospital patient. However, she was as unresponsive as the last. She held that same haunting, unblinking stare that the previous patient had. It was as if they weren't even human, but something else entirely. It then became cold. Colder than it had been. The temperature was dropping quickly. I knew I had to leave before I was frozen to death and lifeless, just like the strange people in that place. Everywhere I turned I ran into more of them. They all looked the same, and I wondered if they may have been the very same people appearing over and over, and that this maze of a hospital was hell-bent on driving me to madness. It was so cold. So cold. I could feel my hair growing stiff from the chill, and the hair on my arms was standing on end. Why was it so cold? I would freeze to death at this rate. It was certain then. I knew that the people pursuing me were not of the living. I was an intruder in this hospital of the dead, and the freezing cold grip of death was going to claim me before I could escape. I was awoken suddenly by the janitor, Mr. Wilson. He had found me lying on the floor asleep with my book in my hand, shivering from the cool night air drifting through an open library window. He bid me good night, and soon after left me to replace my reading materials. It was time to head back to my dorm. I had much thinking to do before I continued my studies. It seemed that excessive reading of the subject of pathology had crawled into my brain, and it was a sure sign that I wasn't too deep. I needed a break. I turned to leave as all was well, my mind made up,